Tenet is now in theaters and is the second most anticipated movie of 2020 for me personally. This is a Christopher Nolan movie. Same director did The Prestige, Memento, The Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar. He's a director that I'm a pretty big fan of. He at one point was my favorite director, but now it's just one of those directors where I really respect him. He's a director that any time a movie of his comes out, it's up there as my most anticipated movie of said year. Tenet, for those of you who don't know, I'm not going to explain the premise, simply put, because I feel like this is a movie, like most Nolan movies, that you want to go into it knowing as little as possible. Thankfully, the trailers are very unrevealing, to be honest. I feel like you watch those trailers and you just kind of get an idea of like the genre that it is. But the genre itself does turn into a different genre by the end of the movie, I like to argue at least. Right off the bat, I'm going to say I really liked Tenet. I think that this is a very entertaining movie. The acting across the board is really good. Robert Pattinson, for me personally, is the standout. John David Washington is really good as the protagonist. Elizabeth Debicki's good. Kenneth Branagh, I really liked his performance as the villainous character. There's no bad performances in this movie, per usual, like a Nolan movie. I also absolutely love the editing scenes. The inversion scenes in particular were very well edited. I mean, I can only imagine how crazy the editing room must have been for this movie. The editing, the splicing of the images, matched with the brilliant, beautiful cinematography is just incredible, man. Especially during the action scenes. Pretty big fan of the action scenes, not gonna lie. Especially the opening scene and anytime there's an inversion scene. The highway chase is also really brilliantly done. I mean, Nolan's a director where I do genuinely think that his practical effects that he utilizes really match his vision in a very interesting light. Speaking of the practical effects, this movie has less than, I believe it's like 300 VFX shots, which is unheard of. Just to give you an idea, most big movies have a couple thousand VFX shots, so the fact that this movie has as many VFX shots as a romantic comedy really does say something. I mean, Nolan shoots a lot of in-camera stuff, and it shows because it's something that you can see that would last the test of time. I loved it. Hans Zimmer did do the score for this movie. Actually, Ludwig, his last name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but he's the same guy that did Black Panther, Creed, Death Wish. I really like his stuff. He's really come to be one of my favorite, current composers. I think he does such a good job, especially for Tenet. It's very bombastic, but at the same time very intense and emotional. It's also very loud, which I got to talk about the sound mixing in this movie. I know a lot of people, especially close to me, that aren't a big fan of the way Nolan mixes his movies. And if you aren't aware of it, what he does is in most movies, the dialogue is in the forefront. And then you have obviously the sound effects, and then you have the score being last, meaning, not as loud as the other two. Nolan has it the opposite. Nolan has it where the music is the loudest, then he has the sound effects, then he has the dialogue. And I personally am fine with his choice because for me personally, I get what he's going for. A lot of times it's like that emotional feeling, it's that intensity that you're just so overwhelmed by what's going on that you almost don't care about what the dialogue is. So, I get it with what he's going for. I'm a fan of it, but I also understand why someone might not be. But speaking of the dialogue, I'll get to that in a moment. But I, again, want to emphasize that it's going to definitely be preference in terms of the way that he mixes the movie. The pacing is also really good. This is a perfectly paced movie. I wasn't bored by this movie at all. And again, I think that's because it has a lot of really cool action scenes and the ideas are there. This is definitely a movie that is thought-provoking to some extent. Now, in terms of negatives, I got to mention it. So, this is a movie that I love what they did in terms of the genre shifting in the final act. I really like that, and I think that it's very visceral and intense in the best of ways. But I think that overall, the final, I'd say 5-10 minutes, I was kind of underwhelmed. Usually in a Nolan movie, and again, I guess it might be expectations, but most Nolan movies have it where the last 5-10 minutes are so emotional, so overwhelming. Even Dunkirk, I found it to be emotionally overwhelming despite you not really knowing these characters too well. But I think that's just it also. I feel like Tenet, it's a 2.5 hour movie. It's an hour longer than Dunkirk, and you don't really feel as though you know these characters. I'm a huge fan of the actors involved, so I cared about the characters, but I didn't actually get to know them. I didn't feel like they were fully fleshed out. which can be kind of a detriment. I'm curious about how I'll feel about it upon rewatching, but that's kind of an issue. And as much as I do think that the story is intriguing, I do think that this movie relies a lot on exposition. I kind of wish that they cut back on it so that way that Nolan would trust the audience even more than he usually does. But I felt like this movie kind of tried to walk the audience a little bit, and I feel like it's not going to age too well. Again, maybe if I rewatch it, I'll say, no, it does. But for now, I just kind of am getting the Matrix and Inception vibes. You know what I'm talking about. The Matrix and Inception, both good movies, but the first time you're watching it, you're hearing everything that the characters are saying with the exposition and everything, and you're like, okay, I needed this. But then when you rewatch it, you're like, well, but I don't think I actually did, because if I rewatched it, I would have picked up on all the nuances. And I feel like that's kind of like what Tenet is in its own right, at least upon first viewing. I do think that the movie's complex, but I think that it's in terms of the filmmaking. I think the filmmaking is very complex, but I think that the story itself is pretty simplistic. So I do feel as though the exposition wasn't really, heavily needed. Overall, though, again, these are just little things in the long run of things. I still think that this movie is a very interesting spectacle. I think that it's an original piece of filmmaking that is Memento meets Inception. It's a movie that I feel like we need during times like this. I needed it as a reminder. I mean, for crying out loud, my favorite movie of the year was The Invisible Man, which I liked, but I mean, come on, that movie came out in February. So like over the course of 6 months, I haven't really liked any movies. What can I say? So Tenet is the movie that I needed during this time period. I think that it's a very well-made movie. I think the technical aspects, the filmmaking, it's all really good. And you might not be emotionally invested, but you are still going to be glued to the screen because the spectacle, the action, the overall filmmaking presentation, it's all there. So Tenet for me personally, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5-star rating, which goes like a hot sauce rating, gets the good old, where is it? Tabasco rating. So pretty high up on my list, honestly, in terms of rating scale. But guys, Tenet, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What's your favorite Nolan film? Comment section down below, and as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll get you guys later.